Hey guys, so I've spent the last 2 or 3 days um, thinking about where we are as a country, where our politics are, and actually listening and reading various people across the web, both pro and anti-reform, pro and anti-fundamental change, um, media, columnists, etc., trying to get a feel for where we are. I remain hopeful that I think genuine change is coming. I remain, unfortunately, highly confident that we are about to hit a very bad crisis that will try the country, perhaps even try much of the world. There's a different point there. But what really actually has made me think was actually listening to some people who kind of put the position of, well, what if reform win and fail, or the Greens, should that come out, or real change is blocked in some shape or form by electoral coalition or something similar to that. That's scary enough. But one of the things that I was left wondering was simply whether or not our politics have the energy left, the structures of government are even capable of delivering up speed of change required to head off what I think is now a mounting crisis within our society. And what I mean by that is multiculturalism is collapsing now. It's been collapsing for some time, but now very much the actual facade is starting to fall off. And with that's going any even pretense of social niceties that went along with it. Those on the left or within the mainstream who claim racism is on the rise across this country are right. It is a racism driven by their decisions and attitudes, but they are right, racism is on the rise. As someone who is fundamentally anti-racist, I know that has other meanings now, but fundamentally who's not a racist and doesn't like racists, I find it very, very worrying. And I find it really, really worrying because I just don't know if our politics are even capable of, providing the speed and the level of change required to head that off. And from that, I wrote a series of questions, of which I don't have the answers for, by the way, because, but we need to start thinking about them. Because either that change comes or we are in a whole world of trouble. Is our politics capable of that level of change? Are our institutions capable of delivering it when so many politicians and leaders within those institutions, and even the clerisy within the media and academia, are even refusing to acknowledge the problems that we have? And those problems are what are driving the rise of racism and extremism within our country. And including that so many of them remain committed to that system that's driving it, which is causing the political inertia, which is forcing or causing our institutions to actually start failing in the eyes of the public. How often do you now have conversations with people where, people are a little bit almost like, well, just let them burn? Now, there's a certain level of poetic justice that I must say that appeals to me at that level for that. But as someone who's effectively a social and political conservative, the idea of just letting entire institutions burn for the sake of it, with nothing to replace them with, is quite worrying for me. Kind of stepping away from that, though, is the big question I think comes into view, and that's can our democracy even survive the breakdown and the destruction of the illusion of multiculturalism, which has been kind of painted onto our society across the rictus grin of an unwilling population. I don't know. But as that illusion shatters, as that facade falls off, and as I said, as political gravity reimposes itself upon the liberal system, and people start speaking their minds, that's what you're seeing now in terms of racism and extremism on the rise. To a certain extent, it's very understandable, though I personally dislike it intensely. Can democracy survive that? Can it also survive the fact that it's not just the majority that are now breaking the pretense of multiculturalism? Let's be under no illusions, there are a large section of the Muslim population particularly that have made it very clear that they're not here to integrate. Quite the opposite. They are, in their own words, here to conquer. How does that manifest? Do we just keep withdrawing into our own communities, into our own cultural blocks? Or is there a breaking point driven by the resentment that's now emerging, the friction and the simple financial reality when something else happens? Is this the David Betts scenario writ large at some point where something happens which drives things over the edge? I don't know. As a social democrat, I wonder how long the welfare state can last if we decide there's no longer any common bonds or history and therefore no common responsibility towards each other. The welfare state is a fat, bloated, and to be honest, corrupt system now. But I don't want to see it completely destroyed. I want it streamlined and made more efficient. I was lucky enough to be born into a country that had a welfare state that helped my family when we were growing up, and I would hope that we can continue some level of that. But I don't know how that continues when there is no commonality anymore. This has always been the argument why a welfare state never really developed fully in the United States. High levels of immigration means much lower social capital, much lower levels of homogenization, and therefore far lower levels of trust across the population when it comes to transfer payments. I don't know. But these are the questions that I ponder, amongst others. And I think we all need to start pondering them because I think they're coming up a lot quicker than many think. The elite in this country still remain largely in denial over where we are. I think, interestingly enough, certain members of the Conservatives are starting to crawl in the right direction. However, that's balanced by Farage and the Reform Party's efforts to a certain extent, walk away from the demands of their bloc in terms of fighting for the historical majority culture and the idea of some sort of larger right of the ethnic British, ethnic English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish populations for this place. That's not to deny other people have a right to be here, but that there is something more if you are ethnically of this place and family has been here for many, many generations. I don't know. I think it's very easy to be overly negative about where we are. I'm not overly negative. I think that we're winning. But I think that people underestimate the danger of the moment. And I think people very much underestimate what that moment could open up into. human systems, be it politics, social, financial, or any other, they're not steady states. And what I mean by that is, in economics, they talk about the economy settling into an equilibrium. That's actually complete and utter nonsense. No economy sits in equilibrium. No human system sits in equilibrium. It is simply normally pausing in a brief moment before moving in a different direction, passing through a period of tranquility along the way. Now, if you believe that, and I would argue that most people should believe that, you only have to look at your own world around you. And then you have to look at our politics and realise that where we are isn't where the system settles. Like a pendulum, they swing from one to the other. And the pendulum, like with any pendulum, the further you retract it in one direction, the harder and the faster it will swing over to the other. And that worries me. Because although I am broadly in favour of many things that historically would have scared the crap out of me, or I would be very anti-against, in terms of immigration and even deportations and re-immigration, I worry that will overcorrect to something that I definitely don't agree with. And I worry intensely that there are people on the right now who will not be happy until effectively a large part of the minority population in this country are purged. Not based upon whether or not they are culturally integrated, British, proud to be of this place, of this country and culture, but simply because they have their own colour skin. And I reject that on principle. I reject that because I have friends in this country and others that are of minority ethnicity, and I reject it on the principle of the fact that I don't believe that you should judge someone based on the colour of their skin, and I also don't believe that they should be judged for the decisions that their parents may have made, or even their grandparents, to move to a different country. And I think that we need to be very, very careful. And I urge those who are probably like me, deeply upset by the level of social change in this country, angry, enraged at the weakness of the political class and the British state, certainly in terms of Islam, to be very, very wary and tempered to a certain extent with your language. I struggle with this myself, but be tempered with your language and be precise. Because there are those out there that do not want to be precise. There are those on the right, as well as within the Muslim population and many beyond, who will happily use the language on either side as a very good excuse to start something. And I'm not sure we want to go there. Sobering, I know.